The Heart of the Bakery by Dean Whitaker. It was 1867 in Charleston, South Carolina. The aroma of fresh baked bread wafted through the crisp autumn air as Sarah Hastings unlocked the heavy wooden door of Hastings' Delight. Dawn painted the cobblestone streets in hues of amber and gold, while early morning fog rolled in from the harbor, carrying with it the salty tang of the sea. At 23, Sarah had grown into her role as proprietor of her family's beloved bakery, though some days the weight of responsibility still pressed heavily upon her shoulders. She paused in the doorway, inhaling deeply. The scent of yeast and flour brought memories of her mother teaching her to knead dough, her father's proud smile when she mastered her first batch of bread. 3 years had passed since fever had taken them both, leaving her alone with the bakery and their cherished recipes. Yet in the quiet moments before sunrise, as she fired up the ovens and prepared her workspace, Sarah felt their presence most strongly. The morning routine was as familiar as breathing, stoking the ovens, laying out ingredients, and beginning the day's first batch of bread. She hummed softly as she worked, her movements graceful and practiced. The gentle rhythm of kneading dough always brought her peace, even on the most challenging days. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah caught movement outside the front window. James Thompson stood there, his broad-shouldered silhouette unmistakable even through the morning mist. The town's master blacksmith had been visiting her bakery every morning for nearly a year now, though Sarah tried not to read too much into his clockwork appearances. The bell chimed as he stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of leather and forge smoke. "Good morning, Miss Hastings," he said, removing his cap. His voice was warm and rich, like honey and tea. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah replied, brushing flour from her apron. "Right on schedule as always." He smiled, and Sarah noticed how it reached his eyes, creating tiny creases at the corners. "Can't start my day without proper sustenance," he said, approaching the counter. "And nobody in Charleston makes bread quite like you do." Sarah ducked her head, pretending to adjust some pastries in the display case to hide her blush. "You're too kind, sir, though I suspect you say that to all the bakers." "There aren't any others I visit," he replied softly, and something in his tone made her look up. Their eyes met for a moment, and Sarah felt her heart flutter. "I've just pulled some apple tarts from the oven," she said quickly, breaking the moment. "Would you care to try one? They're a new recipe I've been working on." James's face lit up. "I'd be honored to be your taste tester, Miss Hastings." She selected the prettiest tart and placed it on a small plate, watching as he took a bite. His expression of delight was genuine, and Sarah felt a surge of pride. "The cinnamon and honey complement the apples perfectly," he said, savoring each bite. "You have a gift, Miss Hastings, truly." Their morning exchanges had become a bright spot in Sarah's day, though she tried not to dwell on how her pulse quickened whenever the bell announced his arrival, or how his smile seemed to linger in her thoughts long after he'd gone. James was unfailingly courteous, but she'd seen the way other young ladies in town looked at him. Surely a successful blacksmith could have his pick of more suitable companions than a baker. As the weeks passed, their morning conversations grew longer, more personal. She learned that he'd apprenticed with his uncle after his parents died in a fire, that he had a younger sister in Richmond, that he loved to read but struggled with Shakespeare. He discovered her passion for experimenting with recipes, her dream of opening a second bakery someday, her secret fondness for penny dreadfuls. One particularly busy morning, as Sarah rushed to serve a crowd of customers, she knocked over a tray of freshly glazed pastries. Before she could react, James was there, helping her clean up the mess. Their hands brushed as they gathered broken pieces of pottery, and Sarah felt a jolt of awareness course through her. "Thank you," she murmured, keenly conscious of his proximity. "Always happy to help, Miss Hastings." He paused, then added Sarah. The sound of her Christian name on his lips made her breath catch. When she glanced up, his expression was tender, almost vulnerable. "There's something I've been wanting to ask you," he began, but was interrupted by the arrival of more customers. By the time the rush subsided, he had gone, leaving Sarah to wonder what he'd meant to say. 2 days later, James arrived at his usual time, but something was different. He seemed nervous, fidgeting with his cap as he approached the counter. "Sarah," he said, using her given name again, "I wonder if I might have a moment of your time." She nodded, heart pounding. "The autumn fair begins this weekend," he said, words coming faster now. "I know you're busy with the bakery, but I thought perhaps, that is, I hoped you might consider attending with me." "As my guest?" Sarah felt warmth bloom in her chest. "I'd like that very much, Mr. Thompson." "James," he corrected gently. "Please call me James." The days until the fair passed in a blur of anticipation. Sarah chose her best dress, a deep blue cotton with delicate white trim, and spent extra time arranging her hair. When James arrived to escort her, his appreciative gaze made her efforts worthwhile. The fairgrounds were alive with music, laughter, and the mingled scents of roasted nuts and spiced cider. Colored lanterns swayed in the evening breeze, casting magical patterns of light across the crowd. James offered his arm, and Sarah took it, savoring the solid warmth of him beside her. They wandered through the fair, trying various treats and playing games at the different stalls. James won her a small stuffed bear at the ring toss, his face glowing with pride when she hugged it close. They shared candied apples and watched a puppet show, laughing together at the silly antics of the performers. As twilight deepened into dusk, James led her to a quiet corner of the fairgrounds, where a wooden bench overlooked the river. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the water reflect the first stars of evening. "I have a confession to make," James said finally, his voice soft but steady. "I've been coming to your bakery every morning not just for the bread, though it is the finest I've ever tasted." He turned to face her, his expression earnest. "I come because seeing you has become the best part of my day." Sarah's heart soared, but she managed to keep her voice level. "Is that so?" "It is." He reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "You're remarkable, Sarah Hastings. Your strength in carrying on after losing your parents, the way you've made the bakery thrive, how you always have a kind word for everyone who comes through your door. I've never met anyone quite like you." Tears welling in Sarah's eyes. "James, You don't have to say anything," he assured her quickly. "I just wanted you to know how I feel. How I've felt for quite some time now." Sarah squeezed his hand. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I look forward to seeing you every morning. The days you can't come seem dimmer somehow." His smile could have lit up the night. Slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, James leaned closer. Sarah's eyes fluttered closed as his lips met hers in a sweet, tender kiss that felt like coming home. The following months brought changes both subtle and profound. James began helping Sarah close up the bakery in the evenings, and they would often take walks along the harbor afterward, talking about their days and their dreams for the future. He showed her his forge, teaching her about his craft, just as she taught him about different types of bread and the science of baking. Their courtship was the talk of the town. But Sarah found she didn't mind the knowing looks and good-natured teasing. She was too happy to care what others thought. One winter evening, as snowflakes danced past the bakery windows, James arrived with unexpected news. A wealthy businessman from New York, Mr. Harlan, had heard about Sarah's bakery through mutual acquaintances and wanted to discuss an expansion opportunity. "He wants to open a larger establishment in Charleston," James explained, his eyes bright with excitement. "With you as the head baker and partial owner, it would mean more work, but also more opportunities to share your talents with a wider audience." Sarah's mind whirled with possibilities and concerns. "It's a wonderful opportunity," she said slowly, "but this bakery, it's all I have left of my parents. I couldn't bear to give it up." James took her hands in his. "You wouldn't have to. The new location would be in addition to this one, not instead of it. And Sarah," he paused, gathering his courage, "you wouldn't have to do it alone. If you'll have me, I want to be by your side through all of it." Her eyes widened as his meaning became clear. "James Thompson, are you proposing to me in my bakery?" He smiled sheepishly. "I had planned something more romantic, but yes. I love you, Sarah Hastings. Your strength, your kindness, your determination, everything about you. Would you consider becoming my wife?" Tears of joy spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will." Spring arrived with new beginnings. The new bakery opened its doors to great success, while the original Hastings delight remained a beloved neighborhood fixture. Sarah and James were married in a simple ceremony in the garden behind the bakery, surrounded by friends and the sweet scent of flowering jasmine. As they shared their first dance as husband and wife, Sarah looked up at James with a heart full of love. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For coming into my bakery that first morning. For seeing me as more than just the baker's daughter. For loving me." James pulled her closer, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for giving me a reason to come back every day. For sharing your dreams with me. For making my life sweeter in every way." They swayed together under the stars, and Sarah knew that while her parents' legacy lived on in her beloved bakery, her future with James was an even greater gift, one filled with love, support, and endless possibilities.